Hey, Coach P here, head coach at TCU. Obviously, hopefully you guys know me. Anyway, I got asked by Mr. Akin, Dr. Akin, to be a part and be able to introduce one of your speakers tonight, Clint Gresham. Anyway, coming from the Patterson Casa, I wanted to show you a little bit about, I know that you guys are into sales, and this is a little bit of part of what your class is all about. So I wanted to show you my sales. You know, when we walked in a long time ago, I had to recruit do a recruiting room. So I just wanted to kind of show you what a recruiting room does from the start of, to be able to compete against the A&Ms and Texases when we started, just from the first time when I was introduced as the head coach, to all the different players from Storm and Norman, to the Rose Bowl, to about any other great event that's happening in TCU as far as college football is concerned. Kind of let you know. You know, you always got to be a real person. So I kind of take you around over here to also guitars. You know, you have to have a passion also about something. You have to be able to get away. You know, it's one of those things where I trade guitars for helmets for guitars. You see Brad Paisley, get a chance to get one of the cool things I get a chance to do every once in a while, and a few awards. You know, when Dr. Akin asked me to be part of this talk and be able to introduce Clint, I just, you know, one of the things I would tell you that keeps me, even in this time right now, with all of us having to be at home, is purpose. Yeah, mentally, and also my job and keeping everybody in line. Because if you want to be the boss, if you're not organized, they're not going to be organized. So I just want to make sure that you let you know, and let you also know, hopefully all of you are safe and healthy. There's one thing in this thing, you get to where you appreciate people. You appreciate people around you, and when you don't get a chance to see them and be a part of them. So this is my desk. Is if you could see here, I've got my laptop open up. I'm working on Cal Berkeley, which is our first ball game. And so hopefully all of this goes. Without further ado, Clint Gresham. Now, Clint was a player of mine. Let me tell you this much. He's a great speaker, and there's a lot of things, because when I talked about purpose, he's one of those guys that has that on many levels, not just is in the business world and talking about those kind of things that he's going to talk to you tonight, but also about him as a human being, as a person, how his spiritual beliefs are, and how he conducts himself on an everyday basis. So it was easy for me when they asked me to be the guy. When Dr. Akin called me and asked me if I'd be a part of this, I just wanted to let you know that that you're going to get a guy that's going to do a great job tonight of talking to you about a lot of different subjects. So without further ado, here's Clint Gresham. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs. Thank you, Coach P. Let's see. Well, TCU family, it is great to be with you. Coach, I appreciate the honor of introducing me. I remember, you know, it was probably 2006. I had decided to go to the University of Oklahoma, which was a mistake. I regretted that, and my mom ran into Coach P at Albernays in Dallas and said that I wish that he would have come to TCU, and that changed my life. Opened up the opportunity for me to come back to TCU and eventually earn a scholarship, and just thankful to be here, thankful to be a part of the TCU community. I got my frog stuff on because that's what we do, we represent. And so I hope you guys are all safe during this ridiculous apocalypse season. It is weird times right now, and I trust that all of you are in full hazmat gear because germs are hard to see, and so we got to be careful out there. You know, I thrive on audience interaction, so this is going to be a little peculiar and might be a little bit clunky at some points, but I trust that it is going to work out. And I would just really encourage you guys to don't fall into the two-screen trap. You know, sometimes when we're watching TV or something, we're looking at our phone too. I just really hope that you will engage here and ask questions and take notes because I'm going to be speaking from my personal experiences that are very close to my heart. And I think that it will really, really be helpful for you guys. And so, again, my name is Clint Gresham. My friends call me Gresh, and I spent 6 years with the Seattle Seahawks, which was 6 years longer than I expected to. You know, every day I'd walk in thinking, are you guys sure? But was able to trick those guys for 6 years, was able to be a part of 2 Super Bowls. I'm 50% in Super Bowls. And so with that said, I'm going to go to our first polling question here, which is, how many of you guys hate the Patriots? And the reason I asked that question is because in Super Bowl 49, we played against the Patriots. And on the 1 yard line, we should have run the ball with Marshawn Lynch, but we decided to throw the ball, and we got picked off in the end zone, and I fell on the ground. I literally fell on the ground when it happened. And kind of a funny story, after the game, we all go into the locker room, and guys are having several different kinds of reactions. Some guys are crying, some guys are screaming, some guys are using some choice words, which is understandable. And so our head coach, Coach Carroll, he looks at me after talking to the team and he says, okay, Gresh, go ahead and talk to us. And what that meant was that he wanted me to go ahead and pray for the team, which I always did all the pregame and the postgame prayers. And so he looks at me and he says, okay, Gresh, go ahead and pray for us. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I have no idea what to say. I don't know. God cursed the Patriots. May they never win another Super Bowl. And God ignored that prayer because they won the AFC division basically like 10 years in a row. Anyways, I don't want to talk too much about the Patriots because they're the worst. So I'm looking at this poll right now, and it says that 66% of you hate the Patriots. Thank you for that. And there's a remaining 34% that says that you don't. I'm going to ask you to leave right now. I'm just kidding. Please stay. I played for TCU 2006 to 2009, and just to prove that I was there, here's a couple of shots of me. Please disregard that Tinder picture. That's absolutely ridiculous. I don't actually have a Tinder. My wife is in the other room right now. She's like, yeah, you better not. I don't. I went to a date party when I was in college, or a like tacky prom thing, and grew out this disgusting mustache. So that's just from a little bit of my experience at TCU. Of course, we got Andy Dalton there, go Frogs. And so here's a picture of my beautiful family when I was living in Seattle. I met my precious wife, Maddie Gresham, and her name wasn't Gresham at the time. I had to convince her first. And we were both volunteer young life leaders. And I heard this Texan accent from across the room, and I saw this tall, beautiful brunette who I'm looking at right now. What's up, girl? And so, of course, since she is from Texas and we met in Seattle, the first thing that we bonded over was honey butter chicken biscuits from Whataburger, which are just good times. We got 2 kids at home. That's our little girl, Zoe, right there. She's precious, and it's absolutely changed my life. That's our dog, Bear. And I'm a proud father. My daughter's saying all kinds of words, and my son is no longer pooping in the house. And so it's a win-win for everybody. Hey, also, I've got some bonus content that I want to give you guys. And also, I want to get you guys my book, which you guys purchased, and I am very thankful for that. I put my heart and soul into this thing, and the reason I chose the word becoming was because that word is both an adjective and a verb. We are all becoming something, but to be becoming is to be attractive. And so the premise of the book is, what does it look like to like who you are when you haven't become who you feel like you're supposed to be? It's sort of this aspirational pursuit of finding wholeness in our life, which is what I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. And so to get your book, you guys need to text TCU to 555-888. And it's going to give you a prompt and to be able to have the book shipped to your house. And it will tell you, it'll give you a discount code because you guys already paid for it. There is a shipping fee on there, but that is going to be refunded. So you guys can do that whenever you please. And I really hope that you enjoy the book. Also, this bonus content that I was talking about, sorry, trying to figure this out here. I'm going to be sending like some inspirational quotes a couple times a month. And so if you text that number to get your book, you can also get those if you would like. So today we're going to be talking about the 4 pillars of wholeness. The 4 pillars of wholeness. And so how I define wholeness is giving up hope for a better past, relinquishing control for a perfect future, and then choosing joy and courage right where our feet are. It's kind of this profound way to live when we let go of the future and just choose to stay engaged in the moment and stay positive despite our circumstances. It's this aspirational pursuit that we never fully arrive at, but along the journey, we can choose to be joyful, we can choose to be courageous, which will translate to a better life for us. And so I want to start with a story that I heard recently. There was a young mother and a young husband who they'd been trying to get pregnant for quite some time. And they finally got pregnant after several years, and they were so excited. And the delivery day finally came. And so they go to the hospital, and after a couple of hours of being in labor, the doctor comes out and tells the husband, "Sir, we actually, we need to perform an emergency C-section." You see, what's happening is that the umbilical cord is wrapped around your child's neck. And so every time that your wife pushes, it's actually constricting his neck, and it's choking off the oxygen to the baby. And so the husband obviously looks at the doctor and says, "Okay, well, stop talking to me, go in and rescue my kid." And so he goes in, they perform it. It ends up being a great procedure. But what happened, because of the trauma of this early experience of the blood and the oxygen being constricted, it ended up creating some things in that child that otherwise probably wouldn't have happened. The child ended up growing up to be very anxious, having problems socializing and finding a sense of purpose, because what trauma does to us, it actually gets stored in our nervous system, and it changes the way that we see the world. And it oftentimes takes great focus to be able to push past those things that happen in our life. And the thing about that story is it's really, really important to me, because I was that child. I was that kid who had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck, and this very, very early experience changed the way that I saw the world. And so when I talk to you guys about wholeness today, the 4 pillars of wholeness, this isn't something that I got from a Tony Robbins documentary. This is something that I've actually had to live out in my life in a daily pursuit. And you know what I've learned is that in this pursuit, it's the most important thing of our lives. Being settled in ourselves, being able to be in control of who we are so that we can go out and we can help other people. It's kind of this idea of when you're on an airplane and you need to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help anybody else out. Because if you don't have a strong foundation to be able to work from, you're constantly going to be trying to catch up, looking to other things to fill this hole in your heart that really cannot be satisfied unless we choose to walk in it. And so I read something the other day, and there was a Barna poll, and it said that millennials believe that the mark of adulthood is an emotional maturity. And I thought that's so profound, and it's so true. We respect people who don't cause drama everywhere that they go. To be around somebody who is secure in themselves almost allows us to step into a place of security. And you know, I don't have it all figured out because emotional maturity is aspirational, meaning that there's always more in front of us. But if we choose to take our first step in that journey, it will create a process in us that will ultimately change our lives. And you know, sometimes I feel like it wasn't until 6 months ago that I became an adult. But what I know is that if you integrate these things into your life, these 4 things that I'm going to be telling you about, that you will walk in wholeness. You will be able to give up hope for a better past, relinquish control for a perfect future, and choose joy and courage right where your feet are, right in this very present moment. And so the first thing that I want to talk to you all about today, oh, there's the definition of wholeness. If you guys want to take a picture of that or something, that might be a good idea. It's worth remembering. Giving up hope for a better past, relinquishing control for a perfect future, and choosing joy and courage right where your feet are. And so the first step number 1, identity. And we're going to start with a polling question. Who are you? That's the question. How would you answer this question? Who are you? Accomplishments, characteristics, purpose, status. I'm checking out your answers here. This is good stuff. It's kind of a challenging question. I had somebody ask me that question a couple of years ago, and I had no idea what to say. It's something that really takes a lot of thought. This is so interesting. So we're looking at about 48% of you guys said purpose, 44% said characteristics, only 9% said accomplishments, and 1% said status. You guys are on it. I don't even have to give you this talk. The reason that I asked that question is because I believe that it is the most important question that we could ever ask in our life. Who are we? Who are we? You know, for a lot of us, we tend to answer that question with the thing that gives us the greatest sense of significance, almost like a default identity. And, you know, for me, as somebody who was able to graduate from TCU, get a degree in entrepreneurial management, and play for Coach Patterson, I mean, one of the most storied guys in college football, and then ultimately go on to play for the Seattle Seahawks and win a Super Bowl game, there was a whole lot of opportunity for me to look to these external things to satisfy something on the inside. And while I have a Super Bowl ring and that's awesome, it never fully satisfied my internal worth. You know, it never accomplished what I thought it was going to accomplish, to make me feel like, okay, now I'm significant. Now I can, you know, sit back and just rely on that. And the truth is that ultimately anything that is external or anything that can be taken away from us is going to create a very, very fragile sense of worth. After we won Super Bowl 48, I thought this was so interesting. After we won Super Bowl 48, for probably like 6 months, all of us were asking each other, I keep waiting for it to sink in that we won the Super Bowl. Like I said that. All of us were saying that. And afterwards, I started to realize that that really wasn't what we were meaning, that I keep waiting for it to sink in that we won the Super Bowl. What I think all of us actually meant was, I keep waiting for this thing to satisfy me the way that I thought it would, and it hasn't. And now I'm actually really scared because I have, in a sense, burned my ships. This has been my sole pursuit since I was 5 years old. I watched the Super Bowl every single year. And then I got it. And now I'm wondering to myself, why is it that I don't feel a sense of completion? And the reason that that is because it was never designed to. It was never designed to fill us up. You know, there's some interesting statistics. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the documentary Broke. It's a ESPN 30 for 30. But in that documentary, it talks about some statistics for ex-NFL guys and other athletes in professional sports. And this is crazy. Within 2 years, according to this documentary, 78% of NFL players were broke, divorced, strung out on some type of substance, just really, really in bad shape. And I started to ask myself the question, like, why is that? Why is it that somebody who could be so accomplished could then end up totally falling into a place of depravity and depression? And I think that the reason that that is because for so many of us NFL players, we knew what to do to be successful, but we didn't know who to be, which is a very subtle shift. You know, a lot of us, we can be very proactive with the way that we approach our day, the way that we approach our goals, being very, very systematic, that this is who I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. This is who I want to be with my family. But the truth is that until you know who you are and what you stand for, everything that you do is going to be undermined. What you do will always be undermined by who you are. And if we want to walk in wholeness, the answer to that question of who you are must be tied to these internal characteristics instead of external accomplishments. Because yes, it may get you respected by people, but it's not going to fill that part in your heart that makes you feel complete, because it was never designed to. And for many of you, I know there's some TCU students on here and some business professionals on here watching. I've realized for myself is that it's crazy to think that there's literally a value tied to who you are. Like, you're worth this much money. This is your human capital, which is a very bizarre, thing to, if you really think about it. And what's important for us is that you will find serenity in your life when you separate your worth from your human capital. Your sense of worth has to come from within. Your identity has to come from something that cannot be taken away from you. Because if it is in something that's external, it is always going to leave you wanting more, and you're never going to experience a sense of contentment in your life. And from what we all know is that we want to experience that sense of contentment. And so we have to go on the inside and figure out who we are and define our identity in the things that we want to stand for. And, you know, I think that all of us, we have a Super Bowl that we're chasing. Something that, man, like, this is something that I want so bad. It's something that I want to accomplish in my life. And we have to realize that whether we get that or not, our sense of worth has to come from within. Our identity has to come from something that cannot be taken away from us. And if we really want to have a healthy self-concept and a firm identity, we have to consciously decide on the positive characteristics that we want to display, and not to make excuses for ourselves when things get hard, but to choose to do the hard thing even when it's inconvenient for us. A couple of years ago, my wife and I, we were in Salt Lake City, and I was training at this gym out there and getting ready for the following football season. And we were looking for something to do. And so we decided to go to this national park called Antelope Island. And it's in the middle of Salt Lake. And we went out there, and what we didn't realize was that this island actually had one of the largest bison populations in the world. And so we drive out there, and we're driving up this hill, and we finally get to the top of this hill, and we look down into this pasture, and we see dozens of these things. We were able to get really, really close to one of these. And this one bison, it was right next to this picnic bench that probably weighed like 200 pounds. And it was scratching itself, and it flipped this thing up into the air. I was just blown away at the strength and just the presence of these animals. I mean, it just really stuck with me. And I started to do a little bit more research about the bison because I just became so fascinated with it. And I found out something really, really interesting. If you look at a bison and you look at, say, a cow, you know, both of those animals sort of look alike. You know, they both walk on 4 legs. But what's interesting about them is that if you have a bison and a cow in the same pasture, and a storm starts to roll in, you've got rain and lightning and thunder, a bison will look at the storm and it will actually head towards the storm. A cow, on the other hand, will walk away from the storm. Now, what that means is that if you're walking away from the storm, you're going the same direction as the storm. And so you end up just spending more time in the storm or the problem that you're in. A bison, on the other hand, because it's heading towards the storm, it ends up passing it and it spends less time in it. And so the point of that is that all of us are going to face storms in our life. All of us are going to have things that try to define us. And the easy thing is to run away from them, to look for something simple, to try to figure out who we are, something external. The hard thing is to do that inner work where you figure out who you are and who you want to be and head towards that thing. And when you head towards it, you start to discover that who you want to be is really on the other side of the thing that you least want to address. And that's really, really important to remember. Who we want to be is on the other side of the thing that we least want to address. You know, I wear these wristbands that I made. I don't know if you guys can see these, but it's got all these bison and they're all facing all these different directions. And the reason that I made this wristband is because when storms come in my life, I want to be the kind of guy who, no matter where it comes from, I want to actually confront it. Because I know that I'm going to end up not liking myself very much, and I'm going to find that I'm constantly in this place of running unless I choose to do the hard thing. And so I've got some action steps for you guys in regards to identity. And I want you guys to really think about this. In regards to your identity, I want you to take an honest personal inventory of where your worth is coming from. I think it's really easy to put our sense of worth in the thing that makes us feel the most significant, which I believe is us running away from the hard things in our life. Because the more challenging thing to do is to actually do the work and head towards that thing and define who we are based on who we are on the inside. Because when we do that, we're going to become the people that we want to be. Point number 2, I think that Akin had some stuff here. I don't know if you guys want to jump in or you guys had any other questions. Let's see what's going on here. I'm trying to figure out this technology.
Oh, how you doing, buddy?
Akin, what's up, man?
How are you? Hey, got first question from Corey Hutchison. Corey wants to know, what would you say the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional maturity? So what's the difference there? Said, you know, Corey said business is talking a lot about the EQ as a necessary leadership quality. What's your thoughts?
I think that they're interchangeable. I think that they really are kind of talking about the same thing. Emotional maturity, emotional intelligence. The point is that, do I take the time to actually think about what's going on inside of me versus just reacting to whatever comes up in any given situation? And it's true. I mean, companies are looking at that, realizing that culture is everything. It really is. And so are you somebody who is adding positivity and confidence to your team, or are you somebody who's focusing on negative things and lacking that sense of emotional maturity on the inside? That's a great question. Let's see, you guys got any other questions here?
Hey, Clint.
Kevin.
Greetings. All right, we got a couple of questions here. I'm going to take this one. And this one's about balance a little bit. You talk about our identity being associated with an internal side, but oftentimes we have a different persona or identity on the outside. And this person was asking, you know, how do you balance that? Or kind of what's authentic to, you know, if those two are competing, how do you kind of manage that expectation or work through that?
I think it's an everyday decision. And I have found personally that I can have this tendency to be in one ditch or the other a lot of the time. And learning to live in that tension is actually what it looks like. You know, you're never fully going to be the guy that's like, okay, I got to figure it out and I'm great. I actually don't trust people like that. People who know all the answers, I don't trust them. I want to hear somebody who doesn't know all the answers and has the humility to ask for help. And so trying to figure out that juggling match is sort of just this personal work that all of us have to do. And learning to be okay in that is the battle. And so if we can be okay in that and just know that there is going to be some tension here that I'm going to have to get used to, which is really hard, then we can actually step into the people that we want to be. Akin, what do you got? You are muted right now.
I was muted. Sorry about that. I got another one from Anonymous, and I kind of like this one. It says, how do you distinguish your worth from your identity, or how you think others see you?
How do you distinguish your worth from your identity? I think that our worth is very, very closely tied with our identity. I think that, again, this is one of those things that, I mean, they're almost interchangeable. You know, who we are on the inside versus what we accomplish on the outside. Defining who we want to be allows us to be those kinds of people. And so whether it's identity or self-worth, whatever it is that you want to stand for, just making the decision that that's the person that you're going to be, and then settling it in your heart. And so whenever something comes up that makes you start to question what that is, you already know that this is the kind of person that I want to be. Another great question.
Hey, Clint, how do you put that in? You know, we're taught from an early age. You just talked about, you know, my goal is to win the Super Bowl or whatever it is, these external goals. If we're looking on internal, how do we set similar goals, but are true to ourselves that we're trying to be? You know, what would those sound like? What would those look like?
Yeah, I mean, there's some intangibles here that, you know, can kind of be challenging to define. You know, all of us have personal goals, but, you know, when we actually take the time to write out in vision board, you know, the kind of person that we want to be, I think that that's the first step to being able to accomplish our professional goals. You know, figuring out who you want to be, what you want to stand for. And when that's defined, you can step into those other things, knowing that you have a strong foundation and knowing that whatever comes towards you, it isn't going to shake you. Whether it's an accomplishment or a disappointment, both of those things almost end up being neutral because they don't affect your personhood on the inside. And so taking that first step to, like, literally write out what are characteristics that I want to cultivate inside of me. And once I start to do that, I can start to look for opportunities to be that person, because ultimately it's a decision. When something comes up that begins to challenge that characteristic that we want to cultivate, we already have it settled that this is what I'm going to do in this situation.
Describe a characteristic real quick. I mean, just so we make sure we understand, because again, we had, 48% of our individuals said the identity is tied to characteristics, and you talk about it, but can you list 2 or 3 that are just kind of good examples of what we would put on that vision board a little bit?
I mean, for me, it's, I want to be somebody who is vulnerable, which almost is another way to say humble.
Yep.
You know, going back to what I said earlier about, you know, I don't trust people who have all the answers. I want to be somebody who's teachable. And when you have that kind of posture of humility, then you can be somebody who, I mean, people are attracted to that. You know, like when we walk in arrogance, or when we walk in, you know, sort of this, you know, presence of, I don't need you to tell me anything because I already know what the answer is. I was like that for a long time because I was operating out of a deep sense of insecurity because all of my worth was tied to what I did. And when we operate out of that, it creates this schism inside of us. And so that's just a couple of examples. I mean, humility, vulnerability, courage, which I'm going to be talking about later. But I think it's really up to you, you know, looking at people that you respect and asking yourself, what is it about this person that I admire? And that was something that was big for me, is I've got a bunch of heroes in my life. I've got a bunch of mentors in my life. And I try to glean as much as I can from these individuals, because I know that the more that I can grasp from other people, the faster I'm going to get to the kind of person that I want to be, and ultimately be able to help and serve the people around me, which I believe is all of us, all of our ultimate callings, to be able to add value and to help others more.
was good.
That's good stuff. I love those questions. Well, let's head on to our next point here. Integrity. That's something that you can add to the list. Integrity. I feel like this one is kind of tricky because sometimes it can create a sense of shame inside of us. And it's something that, we assume that we have. And so I want to pose a question here for you guys. When would you say that you lack integrity? Because it isn't perfection. When would you say you lack integrity? A lot of bouncing back and forth here. It looks like my fourth option didn't make it. But when an opportunity presents itself, occasionally, I think that's the case for a lot of us. Occasionally we lack integrity because we can make excuses for ourselves. And one thing about integrity is that all of us feel like we have it. Prisoners think that they have it. You could walk down D Block at San Quentin and every single inmate is going to tell you, yeah, I'm a person of integrity. Man, this guy just put me in the wrong situation. And the truth is that we also value it more in other people than we value it in ourselves. We expect everybody else to walk in integrity and do the right thing. But when something happens in our life, we can be like, well, it's not that big of a deal. It isn't going to affect anybody. And I needed to just take care of myself and my family. And that's true. We all have a tendency to do that. And, another thing about integrity, much like identity, it is this aspirational thing. But when you say the word integrity, I think a lot of us don't really understand what it means. I've got a friend and his mom can do this New York Times Sunday morning crossword puzzle in 11 minutes. About the same amount of time it took my wife to explain TikTok to me. I'm learning. She said that it's really, really easy to do the crossword puzzle when you understand roots of words. And so when you look at the word integrity, it actually evolved from the Latin adjective integer, this old math term. Thank God I don't have to take math anymore. Integer is a whole number, or it's a thing that is complete in itself. So literally, to have integrity, it means that you operate out of a place of wholeness. It's undivided. You have a single set of morals and ethics and values, not a dual set. You don't have duality in your life where you're somebody else in private than who you are in public. And I really love the first part of what the Neely School says in their mission statement, that we're developing ethical leaders with cutting-edge business competencies and a global perspective who help shape the business environment. Integrity is important. Like, don't gloss over this. It is important when we choose to do the more difficult right instead of the easier wrong. When we choose to not make excuses for ourselves. And the reason that it's important is because self-esteem actually comes from doing esteemable acts. When we do things in our lives that are challenging, whether it's studying for a test or closing a deal, where we did something that was hard, it creates this sense of esteem in our life, which is separate from identity, but it creates this sense of confidence for us. And I believe that that is another one of these foundational things that we have to decide. I'm going to be a person of integrity. And again, like, when you talk about integrity, I think that it can create some sense of shame inside of us, because we think that if you're someone who lacks integrity, it means that you're a bad person. And I don't believe that. I believe all of us have this internal compass about what is right and what is wrong. And when we think about other people and who we're affecting, I think it helps us continue to trend in that direction. But the point is that it isn't perfection. It isn't perfection. It is aspirational, much like all of these things that I'm saying. And I want to share a story with you guys about when I got into the TCU Business School. I would say that I wasn't great at school. I found myself in a communications degree, and I really, really wanted to get into the business school. And so I was working with my advisor and trying to figure out what to do. And I spoke with the dean of the business school back in the day, and he basically told me that if you can get a B in this one class, your GPA will be able to get you into the business school. We'll get you into the business school. So I worked so hard in this class. I did everything that I could. And on the last day of class, I walked up to my professor's desk, and his computer was there, and he actually had all of the grades of the students on there. And he looks at my name, and he looks over to the right, and he says, "Oh man, because you did this extra credit assignment, you actually got bumped from a 79 to an 80. And he knew what was going on. And so he looks at me, he's like, "Congratulations, you made it into the business school." And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking to myself, I didn't do that extra credit assignment. But he thinks that I did. And it's not that big of a deal, because nobody would know about it. And I'll get into the business school, which was my goal. It wasn't a lack of effort. And so I walked away from that, and for a few days, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, man, I want to be somebody who does the right thing, who chooses to do the more difficult right. And so finally I decided I need to go talk to this professor. And so I go and I talk to him, and I mentioned to him that, hey, I actually didn't do that extra credit assignment. I didn't do it. And he looks at me, and he's obviously surprised that I mentioned that. And he says to me, "Well, I want to write you a letter of recommendation, because I really respect that you came in here and you were honest with me." And so he wrote me a letter of recommendation. And because of that letter of recommendation, I was able to get into the business school. And I believe that it was because I exhibited a time of choosing to do the right thing. Now, I don't always do the right thing. I'm much like all of you guys, where, occasionally I do the right thing. And the point is that we want to have more times of doing the right thing than the wrong thing. Because when we do the wrong thing and we know it, it creates this tension inside of us, where I know that that's not the person that I want to be, and it doesn't make me respect myself anymore. And the truth is that people will only respect you as much as you respect yourself. And so you need to do the right thing, because it actually cultivates that sense of esteem and confidence. It is so, so critical. Wholeness within us will only develop in the right environment. We have to actually create an environment inside of us for that thing to have the opportunity to grow. When we choose to walk in integrity, it gives us that opportunity to be the kind of men and women that we want to be. And so here's an action step for you guys, and I hope that you guys are writing this down, because this is good stuff. Take an honest, personal inventory of who we are in private. And when you think about that question earlier, be honest with yourself. The truth will set you free. When you know who you are and choose to do the right thing, it will help you become the person that you want to be. And so let's go and look at some of the questions that you guys had. Akin, Kevin, what do you guys have here for us?
I'll start us out, and I'm going to take you a different direction. It's kind of interesting. You just posed the question, Clint, in private. Obviously, that's the honesty and integrity we think we have, or that's the most challenging time. What about the first time you walked in that Seattle Seahawks locker room, and just all the challenges that you met to try to equal up to what they may have asked you to do as a rookie or not do? What was more challenging, in private, or that moment you walked in that locker room and you got 50 other guys looking at you? All right, come here, rookie. Let me see what you got. Asking you to do stuff that you didn't want to do, or whatever it may have been. What was the bigger challenge?
Well, the beauty of being a long snapper is that nobody knows who you are unless you mess up. And I had a decent career, so I didn't get a whole lot of flack. And our kicker and our punter were actually like way older than me, so they had families and stuff. But I will say this, that one thing that helped me immensely, because being in the NFL, I always say that it makes you decide on the kind of person that you want to be. If you're somebody who's kind of on the fence about, whether you're going to be someone of integrity, it's going to make you decide. I lived with 5 other guys, and we had a house together. And so I had a ton of community around me. And so whenever I left work and came back home, I wasn't isolating myself. I wasn't alone, which is never a good thing. It's never good for us to isolate ourselves, which, in this current environment, it's so weird. It's like, this is the most disconnected all of us have ever been in human history already. And now, don't leave your house. It is not a recipe for good things, which, like,
True.
Thank God for technology where we can have this kind of dialogue. But because I had community in my life, it really created some guardrails for me because, left to my own devices, I'm probably not going to make the right decision. Most of us aren't going to make the right decision. That's why it's so important to have community around us because, people say that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with. So make sure that those people are quality people. Good question.
Hey, Clint, Anthony wants to know, what are some of the greatest lessons and values that you learned from playing under Coach P?
The separation is in the preparation. I have been so blown away at his ability to just consistently start over, start from scratch, always have a chip on his shoulder, always have this sense of having to prove, who they are, which is true. The second that we start to sit back and rest on our previous successes, it never prepares us for the next thing. One thing, this is about Coach Carroll when I was with the Seahawks, really interesting. So my roommate was actually Coach Carroll's personal assistant. He's a guy from Dallas. And so we got to be great friends. And he had all of Coach Carroll's trophies, like Coach of the Year trophies, because Coach Carroll doesn't like having trophies. Because he thinks that if he has trophies, it's going to make him start to look to the past instead of look to the present and ultimately to the future. And so having a sense of preparation and defining the things that you want to accomplish in your life, and then not resting on the things of the past, the accomplishments of the past, really did something inside of me to help me to progress in the person that I want to be.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the top ad PR firms here in town, they kind of view trophies the same way. They take them when they win them, and they kind of throw them in a big aquarium. They celebrate, but they throw them in a big aquarium because it's like, look, it's more about what we do for the client than what we do for ourselves. They don't pound their chest, which is so awesome to see.
Yeah, service is everything.
Yep. Kevin, you're up next.
Clint, let's go the other end of the spectrum. Someone asked, again, if they've got somebody they're working with or know that's showing low self-esteem. And again, we want to help them. We want to support them. We want to encourage them. But there's that fine line. How do you suggest we walk alongside them to help them in that their own challenges to build that integrity and identity that's a more positive look at themselves?
Yeah. That, so one of my mentors, I used to meet with him every single week for probably 2 years. He's actually a guy that married my wife and I, and is just an unbelievable man. And I was a guy that came to the table with a lot of baggage. I struggled in my life with really low self-esteem and worth. And honestly, I think it's why I gravitated towards sports, because sports made me feel like I mattered. And he would always look for things in me that were positive. Like when I would come to him and say, like, man, I just feel terrible about myself and I feel frustrated. I feel like I can't get right in areas in my life. And he would always just look for something that, yeah, but you did this and you did that and you did that. And look who you are, look what you've done. And he would remind me of the things that I have in my life that are positive, because, you know, we have this tendency to always focus on the negative, which, you know, we need to have a certain degree of, because there's some honesty in that. But we also have to have people who remind us of who we are. And so looking for qualities that are praiseworthy and just reinforcing that and encouraging people and just being someone who's outspoken about positive things. I don't think that you need to get too into, hey, I think you need to work on your self-esteem. That's not going to create what you want to have. But just organically looking for those positive things will reinforce who you see them to be. And that's huge too, your perspective of them, because it's almost like this social mirror. Like if you see them as, oh my gosh, they're this and they're this and they're this, like, no, like if it's somebody that you believe in, be like, well, this is why I believe in them. This is why I trust them. This is why I brought them into our team. And so I'm going to continue to cultivate that stuff, because the truth is that our words can either crush people or they can lift people up to step into who they want to be. And we have to be so careful with the way that we speak. One thing that I thought was really fascinating about Coach Carroll is that he was the most disciplined man that I have ever been around in my life when it comes to creating culture. Like, we were 7-9 my first 2 seasons. And every single week he's coming in and he's saying, we are the best team in the NFL. And all of us are looking at each other like, we just got blown out by the Browns, who were really bad. And so he just was that kind of guy who just made the decision that I'm going to focus on the positive and I'm going to speak towards what I want to create. It's almost like you have to use your words as a thermostat instead of a thermometer. A thermometer just says what is there. A thermostat sets the tone and the temperature of the room. And so as a leader, that's you. Everybody's looking to you. And so if you're somebody who's complaining, if you're somebody who's focusing on the negative, your team is going to be doing that. And so as somebody who is in leadership, and all of us are in leadership in some capacity, you have to be somebody who chooses to focus on the positive, because ultimately it's going to create that culture around you that you really want to create. And then it ends up becoming an ecosystem of itself. And anybody who steps into it, it's just going to grow and grow and grow.
Great insight.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Okay. Should we go on to the next one here?
Onward.
Bravery. Bravery. This is one of my favorite ones that I have. I know a guy who, he used to write stories in Hollywood. He would write screenplays. And so his job was literally to write out stories. And one thing that he said that I will never forget, he says that the element that he uses to either make an audience hate a character or love a character is the absence or the presence of bravery. And it's like, if you think about it, if Simba wouldn't have gone back to Pride Rock, we wouldn't have liked Simba. That would have been a bad movie. If the Joker, which is an unbelievable movie, if the Joker wouldn't have gotten all crazy and awesome and messed everybody up who heard him, it wouldn't have been a very exciting movie and you wouldn't have cheered for that guy. If Joe Exotic in Tiger King wouldn't have put out the word about Carol Baskin, we wouldn't be talking about that show. And if you haven't seen that show, you need to see it because it is crazy. Bravery is esteemed. We respect bravery. But one thing about bravery is that it's a lot like integrity in that we value it more in other people than we value it in ourselves. You know, we expect other people to do the right thing, but we can make excuses for ourselves. And the truth is that the lack of it or the presence of it either robs us of self-esteem or it creates self-esteem. If we lack bravery, if we're always running away from the storm, in a sense, it is perpetuating this sense of self-hate, disappointment, and shame, and it's constantly going to be pulling us in this negative direction. But when we choose to do the hard thing instead of the easy thing, it actually creates that sense of confidence that I was talking about earlier. And, you know, the reason that bravery is so revered, I believe, is because it always risks standing alone. You know, it triggers our deepest sense of belonging. All of us want to belong. We were created to live in community with each other. But if 99% of the people that you're with are saying one thing and you're thinking, no, that's not the right thing to do, and you say otherwise, Well, now you've just exposed yourself to a whole bunch of Instagram trolls. And now you're going to have to deal with people criticizing you, which is really, really hard, especially if you don't have those other characteristics that I mentioned earlier. If you don't have that bedrock, whenever criticism comes, you're going to be thinking to yourself, is this person right? And if you're thinking to yourself, is this person right? Then you're always going to be living to be approved by other people, and you're never, ever, ever going to fully get it. You know, if we live for the approval of others, we will die over their criticism. And so when we choose to do the brave thing, knowing that we have our integrity and our identity settled, it makes that much, much easier. You know, this desire to belong is primal. And so there's literally this, this disconnect inside of us when we choose to do the right thing. And the key to being somebody who is brave is having real community who knows you. I mentioned that earlier, how important community is. When you have people around you who truly know you, that you can be yourself around, instead of this sort of facade, here's my resume, this is who I am, here's my social media accounts, this is who I'm presenting to the world. But somebody who actually you can go and share the things in your life that you feel ashamed of, that you feel hurt by. That is the way that we can step into bravery. When I was talking earlier about my time with the Seahawks, how I had community outside of work, that created an environment where I could walk away from football, even though I felt like a failure there at times, and step into something where people would encourage me, even though I felt like I didn't have what it took. And because I had that community around me, I was able to say no to things that I know that I didn't want to pursue in my life, and say yes to the kind of person that I really wanted to be. And so here's a question for you guys. How many of you have someone in your life who you feel really knows you? I mean, like really on the inside. Something interesting about this, I was listening to a podcast and it was saying how the number of people who have a close friend has drastically dropped in the last several years. That we used to have community around us, and now the number of people who have one friend is down by like 70% or something like that. It's crazy what technology has done to us in isolating ourselves from people. So how many of you have someone in your life who really knows you? Let's see if this poll will come up here. Someone in your life who really knows you. Wow, you guys are so connected. For the people who said I don't, I so appreciate your honesty. You know, when I was talking earlier about having integrity and just having the courage to look at the hard things, you know, this can be something that can be challenging. And for myself, football created something in me where it almost made me not trust people very much. So I wouldn't let people close to me. And all that did was create a sense of shame and isolation, and it never made me feel very good about myself. Most of you guys have someone who knows you. That's awesome. I'll say this about bravery. To be brave and to walk in bravery, it means that we're vulnerable. And when you hear the word vulnerable, I think it can almost create this illusion of weakness. Like if you're vulnerable, it means that you're more easily going to be attacked or taken advantage of. And I don't believe that that's true. I believe that vulnerability is one of the most powerful things in the world because it creates a real sense of connection instead of having all the answers, like what I was saying earlier. I was leading this men's study for the Seahawks. And so we would come in and we would talk about a book or something. And I was trying to create like some dialogue back and forth because a lot of these guys, I mean, you can imagine sort of this bravado, macho environment where you don't show weakness. And so I I just sort of put it out there. I told all of these guys that I was really, really struggling with this sense of fear and job loss. I felt like I wasn't playing very well. And every day I was like, man, I feel like they're going to be bringing somebody else in, and it made me feel ashamed of myself. And I said that, and it was like crickets. It's like nobody said anything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. All of these guys, they are so confident, and I'm just the worst here. And it created such a sense of shame inside of me. It made me feel like, oh man, I guess what I believe about myself is actually true. And then something happened. I had a guy walk up to me afterwards when nobody was looking, and he shared with me, he's like, man, Gresh, I got to tell you, I'm with you on that. I'm really, really struggling, and I'm really, really having a hard time. And we were able to talk through that and encourage one another. And all of a sudden it's like, dude, you and me, man, I'm for you, and I'm with you. And you're always going to get encouragement from me. And it created a unbelievable depth in our relationship and our friendship. And the truth is that vulnerability is not weakness. And that myth is so profoundly dangerous. Sometimes doing the brave thing makes you look strong, but I think a lot of times doing the brave thing makes you look weak, where you share the truth of who you are with somebody that you can trust. And if you're somebody who, like me, struggled with connecting with people at times, go out and find somebody. Find somebody and have the courage to share the truth about what's going on the inside of you. You'll be blown away about the connection that it will create, and just the sense of relief, because now you're not the only one carrying that burden. There's this story that I absolutely love that's in the Bible. It's in Mark chapter 3, and it talks about this guy who has a withered hand, and essentially he has a disability. And all of them are in the temple, and all of these Pharisees are looking at this guy, and they're looking at Jesus who's in there, and they're wondering whether or not Jesus is going to heal this guy. And because it was the Sabbath, he wasn't supposed to heal them, which is so ridiculous. And so Jesus looks at this guy, and you got to imagine, like, this guy, he's got a disability, and everybody in the room is talking about it. Like, oh my gosh, like that would make me feel so small. When I was in high school, I had terrible, terrible acne, and it made me so self-conscious, and it made me feel like every room that I walked into, everybody was talking about me, and it made me feel small, and it made me think about myself too much instead of thinking about others. And so you can imagine that this guy is also feeling a little bit insecure. And so Jesus reaches out to this guy, and he says to him, hey, stretch out your hand. Now, again, if I'm that guy, I'm thinking, whoa, that's super offensive. You're literally asking me to do something that I can't do. I feel so ashamed of this thing that's just tethered to my side, and you want me to stretch it out? Like, are you making fun of me? And it's interesting. It says that he stretched his hand out, and then all of a sudden, just bloop, it got restored. It says that his hand got restored as whole as the other. He was literally brought to a place of wholeness. And the reason that that is because he took the thing that he felt the most ashamed about, his disability, and he showed it to somebody else. He had the courage to bring that thing out and expose it. And when that happened, he was brought to a place of wholeness. He experienced peace. All of a sudden, that shame that was there wasn't there anymore, because that's what community does, and that's what bravery does, is that it creates this sense of confidence inside of us, and it makes doing the hard thing much, much easier. And the really, really great thing about bravery is that it's a decision. It's not an emotion. It's not a feeling. It's not something that we try to be like, okay, now I feel it. Now I'm going to do it. The feeling always follows the action. And another great thing about bravery is that it's like a muscle, which can be exercised, which can be refined and strengthened, and it's transferable. So when you do something hard in one area, let's say you work out 4 days a week and you've been struggling trying to get a workout in, you start to do that. You do the hard thing. Well, now all of a sudden that confidence is going to translate to other areas in your life, and you're just going to start to feel more confident in who you are. And all of a sudden it's going to change the perspective and the way that you see the world. And it's just sort of this 1 degree shift that every single day when you decide to do it, it strengthens that thing. And you no longer get afraid of criticism from people because you're so strong in this area of choosing to do the more difficult right. Bravery is a decision that we have to make every single day. And so an action step for you guys: make a small decision for bravery every single day. It could be something as simple as, I didn't want to take out the trash, but I did it anyways. Something as simple as that. Or it's, I had to have a conversation with my daughter that I didn't want to have, or with a friend that I didn't want to have, something that they really needed to hear. But because I did that, I feel more confident in myself. And there's this strength inside me that all of a sudden became more apparent after I did the hard thing, because bravery is not a feeling. And then point number 2, show your withered hand to somebody that you trust. All of us have one in some capacity, something that, we feel ashamed about, or something we feel like, if people knew this or knew who I really was, they wouldn't like me. And so I put on this mask and just pretend like everything's okay. And meanwhile, I'm secretly dying. So we have to have the courage to live a life that is open, because that's the only way that we're going to create that real sense of community, instead of the facade that, makes us look like we got it all together, but we're actually alone and isolated. And so I think we got some questions here from you guys that I'd love to answer. What do you got for us, Akin?
Well, that's up. Here we go. We got we got 2 questions right here together, and they're really they dovetail together so well. Lori Bowden wants to know, do you think there was a time in your life that you realized you now live by these 4 pillars? Was it brought on by your faith, your age, or football? And then because I kind of know you, so I kind of know where this answer is going to go. So, and I'm going to dovetail it with this next question. In what situation do you believe honesty is bravery?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I think that honesty is bravery, especially if it's something that you don't want to say. If it's something that, I know that this is probably going to hurt somebody's feelings, or this is me standing up for myself. Maybe you're somebody who, like me, also struggled with kind of this low self-worth, and you sort of just thought that the loudest or most confident voice in the room must be right. And when you finally start to stand up for yourselves, all of a sudden it starts to create that. And then the first question, I would say it was a mix of my faith and my age and the people that I was around. I mean, football was really, really hard for me. Playing in the NFL was really, really hard. It was this constant 24/7 job interview that lasted for 6 years, where you're only as good as your last moment. And everything is evaluated. Like, it felt like the Gestapo was following me everywhere. like just waiting for our moment till we can replace you for somebody cheaper. And there is some truth in that. The good thing that it did was it exposed me to ideas that I otherwise wouldn't have found myself in. And then a lot of it just comes with age, like the male brain doesn't get fully formed till 25 or 26 years old. For me, it was about 33. And so Akin's still working on it there. You're almost there, man.
57, man. I'm trying. Hang with me.
Yeah, so it's a progression. And I'm probably going to say the same thing in 5 years and 10 years. But the point is to just get these ideas into your mind, because knowledge is power. When we start to think about these things and actually consider them, that's the shift. That's the shift. And the more that we do that and remind ourselves of that, and then have people around us to remind ourselves of that, because we cannot rely on our own willpower to make these kind of changes. We have to have people around us who are going to also speak into this. All of a sudden, it creates this momentum that is very, very hard to slow down. Great question.
What we're going to do, instead of taking one more question now, we've got about 15 or 20 more minutes. So just kind of just let you know what time it's there, because I know you've got one or two more subjects. Plus, we want to open up for Q&A, so let everybody know that we'll have question and answer at the end as well. And Clint, I think you've got a special guest who will join you for a question and answer as well, correct?
Yes. We're going to
All
have,
right.
yes. Okay. So I'll run through this last one real quick, and then we'll get to the good part where you get to see a very beautiful woman alongside with me.
Perfect. Thank you.
Who's amazing. So the last point is grit. Grit. During my time with the Seahawks, we got to have a ton of unbelievable speakers. And one of the speakers that we had was this lady by the name of Angela Duckworth. And she wrote a New York Times bestselling book called Grit. And so grit is this sort of inner resoluteness, this dogged fight that I'm going to choose to get back up even when I get knocked down. I mean, here's a great example of it. I was listening to this podcast, and this guy was telling this story. It's a true story about his dog. And he was living in California, and one day his dog starts walking up to the door, and he looks like he just went through a paper shredder. He's got scratches all over him. I mean, he's bleeding, so he rushes him to the vet. He ends up having to get 173 stitches. And so he had no idea what happened to his dog. And one day, a few days later, his dog walks out, and he had this hill that went up pretty high in his backyard, and he sees his dog start to walk up this hill. So he follows his dog up there, and he gets to the top of the hill, and he realizes what happened to his dog. He looks around at the top of this hill, and he sees not one dead coyote, not two dead coyotes, not 8 dead coyotes. He saw 11 dead coyotes up there. That dog is a savage. I need that dog to mentor me. Like, that is unbelievable. He's like, you come and you bite me. He's like, hold on a second. I'm going to take care of this other coyote, and then I'm going to get to you. And just bam, bam, and took those dudes out. That is grit. Sort of this dogged fight. I just think it's absolutely amazing. And so Angela's talking to our team, and she starts to say that we don't really know how to cultivate it. It seems that you're either born with it or you're not. But she alluded to the work of a woman named Carol Dweck, who is all about growth mindset. This idea of when something presents itself that is a disappointment, it's an opportunity instead of a sentence to this is how it's always going to be. And so my belief in myself was very, very low. Like, my self-appraisal was unbelievably shakeable in a negative direction. And so after Angela finishes talking to us, and she sort of gives us a few keys, she said that you can actually go home and you can take a test, and it will tell you how gritty you are. And so I made the mistake of going and taking this test, and I get the results. It comes up on the screen, and it says, congratulations, which is the growth mindset phrase. Congratulations, you scored higher than 20% of people in America, which is a very bad score. And I'm sitting there thinking about that. I was like, man, that's terrible. And it's interesting is that, like, I look at myself and I'm like, man, like, I've been successful. I've played in the NFL and got a degree from TCU. I wrote a book, got to travel all over the world. But why is it that when the script inside of my mind is tested, it's one of negativity, hopelessness, and depression? And I think that the truth is that that can be the case for a lot of us. We can have this script of failure running through our mind. And we need to make this shift from having this sense of failure to maybe I'm just not there yet. Like, something is being cultivated in me. And we change that script inside of our mind to not yet, to I'm trending in this direction. All of a sudden, grit grows inside of us. And the truth is that comparison is the thief of joy. When we start to compare ourselves to other people, thank God for social media, right? All I have to do is look out for 1 second and see everybody else who is so amazing. And the truth is that social media is the highlight film, and we don't always see the B-roll. And all of us are struggling with something in some capacity. But when we start to compare ourselves to others, it creates this sense of failure because there's always going to be somebody else in front of you who's better than you. And that was a big takeaway for me from my time with Coach Carroll is that he would always talk about just, I want you to be your best self today. Like, I don't want to have to bring somebody else in here to motivate you. I want you to compare yourself to yourself because you're always with yourself. So if you're looking at it and you're thinking, okay, how did I do yesterday? This is what I want to do today. It starts to create this shift inside of our mind that changes that negative self-talk to be something of positivity, and it causes grit to grow inside of us. And so I'm rushing through this one, but this one is really, really important. Creating grit inside of you is going to help cultivate that sense of confidence, and it's going to help you decide that you're trending towards not yet instead of I'm a failure. And so I got a couple of questions here. Maybe we can just answer those real quick, or the action step. Sorry. The action step would be to measure yourself against yourself and focus on what you can control. And so in conclusion, at the end of the day, you have the power to decide the kind of person that you want to be. I think for some of you, maybe you've never been told that. You've had loud voices in your life who've said that, no, this is who you need to be. And now is the time for you to start to step into the person that you were created to be. Somebody who is strong, somebody who is brave, someone who is gritty, somebody who walks in integrity and has this sense of identity that is not founded in something that can be taken away, but it's something that is internal, these characteristics that we want to cultivate. And so when you know who you are and you walk in integrity and you choose bravery and you decide to walk in grit, your life will be so much better, and it will create the environment inside of you that will cultivate a sense of wholeness. And so, hey, if you guys want to connect with Maddie and I, you guys can follow us on social media. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. You should definitely follow my wife because she's hilarious. And it's actually one of my favorite things about her. She is so, so funny. And speaking of my wife, Madison, she's going to come in here and we're going to have just a quick Q&A. Let me adjust our chairs here. Why don't you come around on this side? So I've got this microphone right here, so maybe I'll just have to sort of hold this.
Delicate.
Excuse me for one second. Yeah.
Hello.
This is my precious wife, Maddie.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm great.
You've been thinking about me all day, haven't you?
I just have been sitting over there waiting so I can sit next to you.
She's the best. So, Akin or Kevin, how are we?
Good. Thanks for getting in this.
Now that I see Maddie.
Exactly.
Oh,
Life's gotten better. Thanks.
I'm sorry for the horror that you guys have had to watch for the last hour. Finally, there's something beautiful.
You're sweet.
All right, Matt, of all those points that Clint just talked about, again, when you first met him, was he vulnerable? Was he brave? What stood out to you that kind of drew you to what Clint was living authentically? What did that mean, and what drew you to that and to him?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the reasons that I actually agreed to be his girlfriend was because he basically one day laid out all of his, I guess you would call it baggage. Like
It's Louis Vuitton.
It was Louis. Like stuff he struggled with, things that he had done that maybe I would find out about, character flaws, his past, like all these different things. And he was like, I just want you to know all these things before you say yes to being my girlfriend. And I had just, I guess, my most recent relationship prior to Clint was a lot of things were like hidden from me. And I thought that he was super great, but really he just didn't tell me a lot of stuff. So I found that out the hard way. So I so appreciated Clint being like, hey, these are the things that, because we all have stuff. And I just loved that he told me, like, I wasn't saying yes to a question mark. I was saying yes to like, I'm not, nothing's a secret, you know, I know exactly what I'm getting into. And I think that's just how he has always been. It's something that I really admire about him. He's always had a lot of integrity and a lot of vulnerability. And yeah, so I was like, let's do this thing. I can deal with someone telling me things.
Yeah.
Very good. Thanks. Akin, what you got?
Bravery. Let me ask you about bravery, okay? I really, listen, everybody seeing this whole thing out there, you got to do me a favor. You got to go to Clint's Instagram and you got to find the video where he took the neighbor's dog, not Bear, took the neighbor's dog on the bike ride. That's bravery. That's bravery.
That was a mistake. That dog knocked me off the bike. I still have scars on my hand. I was trying to do a nice thing. And all of a sudden, we're cruising down the road, and it's great. And the dog makes a 90-degree turn right into the side of my bike and crushed the bike and my confidence.
You know, grit. You really got to have grit to play collegiately, and you got to have a lot of grit to play in the league in the NFL. Question is, kind of when you saw guys that were, you know, great players, but yet lacked that inner, and I'm going to call it inner strength, because that's really, to me, what it really is inner strength, where you can progress to the next level without worrying what kind of persona you're throwing out there. So talk a little bit about those guys that you saw that were five-tool players, but yet lacked that inner drive, that inner grit to help them stay there.
I would say that it was very obvious, very quick, the guys who were gritty and the guys who weren't. I also think that there's a lot of guys who were able to hide it very well. You know, that guy that I mentioned in the men's group that I was leading, man, I would have never thought that he was struggling. Never. But all of a sudden he comes up, he's like, dude, me too. And, you know, the guys that either could find something to like, this is why I'm here. I think purpose has a lot to do with it. Like when you know, like, okay, I know that this is hard, but this is part of my purpose. This is part of why I was created. It helps to cultivate that strength and that confidence. And I mean, a lot of it is just reps, you know, I mean, the more reps that you get, it's the whole 10,000 hour rule, that you finally become a master of something once you've practiced it for 10,000 hours. And then being able to look back on your preparation, being able to look back on, okay, I've done this, this, and this. And so I can step into whatever this is with confidence. And I think for a lot of guys, and towards, you know, certain parts of my NFL career, I struggled with it too. I forgot who I was. And so we always need to be reminded of who we are. And that's why I was so big about telling you guys, okay, what are characteristics that you want to cultivate in your life? And when you cultivate those things, all of a sudden, a lot of those other things that I said are much, much easier, and you have a wind at your back instead of a wind at your face.
Yep, Mike. I tell my students this when I'm describing Clint Gresham to them. I will tell them this, and this sticks with me, and it always will. Clint's the type player that, you know, the special teams guys, the kickers, the kickers, punters, you know, place kickers, they kind of have their own little practice, you know, off to the side elsewhere. Clint would actually get 15 yards from the goalpost, and this is back when the goalpost had the big pad on it. And if you've ever been to Amon G. Carter, you know, on the goalpost pad it says TCU. Clint would back off 15 yards and he would snap his practice snaps, and every one of them would drill the C. I mean, right in the center. And once again, if you go to his Instagram page, you'll see him snap a ball from across a hotel room, and he's taken the trash can and he set it on the chair, and it's against the door. He'll snap it into that. And I know Clint. He did that first take. This was not one of these ones where he sat and hold on, I got to redo it. Delete, trust me. He snapped it into that as I'm getting choked up. Kevin, bail me out.
Emotional.
Yeah, if you guys want to see that video, it is pretty awesome. I think it was 2016. That was a while ago. I had a workout with the Lions, and and so I was in Detroit and I'm sitting in my hotel room. I was like, man, I got to get my mind right for tomorrow. I got to get focused. And so I always believe that when we aim small, we miss small. And so I wanted to have the smallest target possible to focus on, which ended up serving me well. That's why I could hit that C so often. Kevin, you're on mute.
Oh yeah. I was like, no one's talking.
Mute.
Still on mute. Still
Oh,
on mute. All right, there we go.
there we go. Sorry about that. All right, a few more questions. In this one, a lot of different attendees, and I like, just to see where this one goes. This person talked about, obviously Clint and Maddie, faith is a part of your core a little bit. This person claims to be an atheist, yet believes much of the same things that you do as well. So he's just curious, how does it all work? Obviously, that's a part of who you are. It's not who they are, but what's the similarities, or how would you kind of discuss that or have that kind of conversation with this individual?
Yeah, I think all of us are on our own journey. And
Yep.
I think what's interesting about the principles that we stand for is that they really are these universal truths that doesn't take rocket science to agree that that's probably a good way to live. Mm-hmm. And so for us, it's just sort of these guiding principles and understanding that it helps create a sense of purpose in our life. Because there's been times in my life where I didn't feel a sense of purpose. And so, wherever you're at, I mean, that's just part of our story. And, we celebrate whatever background that you have. But just knowing that developing a sense of purpose and really looking at yourself takes a lot of guts. And for us, we found the life that we wanted when we chose to walk out these principles.
Got it. Now, principles of a champion, obviously the name of our title and of the talk. So I like what's going on there.
My wife just had to run because it's my daughter's bath time. So,
well, there you go. Hey, I'm gonna lighten it up here again. What's something you miss about TCU or Fort Worth? Obviously, you're still in Fort Worth, but just kind of TCU, the days, if you will. Yeah. Catherine would like to know.
Man, I miss the relationships. I was a Kappa Sig over there and obviously had a bunch of friends on the football team. But I just miss all the friendships. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is going back to the football games and tailgating. And you just walk around and it's like, and it's changed so much. Oh my gosh, Amon G. Carter is a different place, man. We used to have practice on Sunday nights and they'd turn the lights on, when we get in October, November. And there would literally be like a swarm of crickets everywhere. And they don't have that problem now. We had a lot of fun with that too. I'd go grab like a handful of crickets and throw it on somebody's back. And it inevitably would like crawl up onto their neck, which was hilarious. So, but yeah, the relationships, that's what it's all about.
Nicky, you got one?
Yeah, I'm still muted here. I'm coughing away. I got two great questions for Maddie. She takes off and runs.
I might be able to answer it for you.
No, you can't. Tyler Thomas wants to know, who was the leader in the Seahawks locker room and what drew the team to them? That's a good question.
That is a good question. I would say that there was a bunch of them. And I mean, obviously, the quarterback's going to set the tone. But Russell Wilson really stepped into something that was already moving. Our defense was ridiculous. I think we had the number one defense like 2 or 3 years running. And I mean, there were some stars on the defense, Bobby Wagner, Richard Sherman, our entire secondary, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Brandon Browner, and then Marshawn Lynch obviously was a beast. That's why they call him beast mode. And so I would say that there wasn't one single guy, but there was a lot of guys who would encourage each other. And a big part of our win was this idea of I'm playing for the guy next to me. And it's sort of that mindset of service because whenever we start to just worry about ourselves, it never creates the kind of culture that we want to have. And so it was a huge part of the messaging from our head coach that, hey, there's a guy next to you. He's got a family. He's got dreams. How can you make that guy better? Because we only get to keep what we give away. When we start to hoard things instead of being open and allowing other people to glean from us, then our life gets small. And all of you guys that are watching and gals that are watching, a small life is not something that we want, like in a sense of, esteem, like we want to have this feeling of confidence and strength. And whenever we let other people into our life and choose to serve them, I believe that it creates that for us.
You talk about the players there, Clint, and obviously you've talked a lot throughout this evening about Coach Carroll. Was it really player-led, or Coach Carroll was the instigator to create that culture that you talk about there? He's highest paid coach in the NFL, so obviously he's doing something right.
Yeah.
Which was it? Did the player-led, or was Coach really kind of driving that culture?
I mean, him and our general manager, John Schneider, they spent 2 solid years trying to build the team. It was crazy. My first year, we had 270 roster transactions, which is a player getting cut and a player getting brought in. The next closest team was like 80. So it was a revolving door for a year. And like every day I'm like, oh man, glad I'm still here. And so it took a long time to find the people that he wanted. And one thing that it was interesting too is that the Seahawks in 2010 and 2011 was basically USC 2.0. I mean, there was probably like 8 guys on our team that were at USC with Coach Carroll. And most of our coaching staff was from USC. And when you think about creating a culture, it's much easier to just bring people in who already understand it. And so anybody who comes in that was not from that, there's this momentum going. And so he's just a brilliant man. When he cut me, when he fired me, I was like, man, I still like you. Gosh, I don't want to like you because you just fired me, but God, you've had such an impact on my life. I actually have one of the chapters in my book starts out with a quote from Coach Carroll. And I share some other stories about experiences with him. And man, he just calls out the gold in people. And that's the kind of man that I want to be. And I'm thankful to have had the opportunity to be around a guy like that because he is uncommon.
Sounds
hey,
like
Kevin
it.
Carlson asked a great question here. Says, I'm a freshman at TCU. What advice would you give me and my classmates as we continue our journey in college and beyond? Any words of wisdom? Okay, everybody sit back and get ready.
Man, I think that the biggest thing is getting to know yourself, finding out what you like and what you don't like, and like really thinking about it, and then giving yourself permission to make decisions for yourself. When I went to college, I went to Oklahoma my freshman year, which was a big mistake.
Bad move.
Should have gone to TCU. When I got there, I was not ready for college at all. I was a mess. And I think part of that reason was now all of a sudden I'm having to make decisions that I didn't really know how to make or were often made for me. And so now that I'm several years removed from that, I think learning to make hard decisions and defining this is what I stand for, this is who I want to be, this is the kind of people that I want to surround myself with takes a lot of guts. And like for me, like when I was in a fraternity, it's like, dude, you don't rock the boat, man. It's like all of a sudden you're around people who like, you better do what we're doing or we don't want to be around you. And that's scary. And so, but the truth is that people respect somebody who stands up for something. It's the thing that I was saying about bravery. Like all these movies, the main character all of a sudden has to make a decision to do something that's very, very hard that they were afraid of. And because they did the hard thing, all of the audience loves them and cheers for them. And it's the same thing in our life. We're all living our own story. And when we choose to do something that is, maybe not what everybody would do, people may disagree with it, but they'll respect it. And you'll respect yourself too.
Very nice. All right, Clint, I got a final question that we're going to wrap it up here. Again, you talk about yourself, we look at ourselves, but as far as the teammates you've had, who's the best teammate you had that embodied all this stuff, that it's just, whether at college or pro, just that person that set the bar for you that you still admire probably to this day?
One of those, there's several, but one of them is Matt Hasselbeck, who he was there in 2010 and 2011. But he was a guy who, took me in under his wing and just sort of talked to me about this is what life is like. And he took the time, and, he would come sit with me at lunch, and I'm like, oh my God, this is Matt Hasselbeck. I watched you in the Super Bowl, and you feel like larger than life. And like, we're just sitting here, chatting about basketball or whatever. He was so normal, and that really, really marked me, because it's like, I'm a rookie long snapper. I'm the bottom of the totem pole, and here's this star quarterback like taking an interest in me. And so I would say for people listening, don't underestimate your influence. Be somebody who looks for the person that feels left out. Be somebody who takes the time. A lot of times we can just worry about ourselves and be like, okay, like I just want to make sure that I'm all good, and we can forget the point of all of this life is to serve other people. And so look for those opportunities, because there's a lot of hurting people out there, and the more that we start to consider others and put ourselves in other people's shoes, it just creates a life around us that is really, really beautiful.
Well said. Well said. Well, from my perspective, I just want to thank you for taking time and pouring into this evening, and our students. I know Dr. Akin's got some things, with the class that helped put this program on. But just for me, thank you, Clint. It was a pleasure to be a part of this this evening. Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. Again, with the book, you guys text the number 555-888 and text the word TCU, and it'll give you instructions. Basically, whenever you check out on my website, where you click the book and click checkout, there's a discount code. You just enter TCU for the discount code, and we'll be able to ship your book to you. I'm going to autograph all of them. So text is working.
Say again.
We're all good. Yeah, so text that number, 555-888 TCU. If what my wife just said is right, we'll figure something out. But text that number and it will be okay.
Clint, I can't thank you enough, man. It's we sat down and we were brainstorming. Kevin, Brandon, and Zach and myself, we've sat down brainstorming. What are we gonna do this semester? How are we gonna do this? We had learned a lot in the fall, and we wanted our own standalone event for our new customers, for our new sales center. And I'll tell you something. You're the first guy that popped into my mind.
Man,
I said,
thank you.
Let's see if Clint will do this. And I'm absolutely heartbroken we're in this Corona environment, because if you guys could actually see him live, he is, what you see is what you get. He is a humble leader. He's a gracious man. I know he's a great husband because he's got a phenomenal wife. He's a great dad. And, it's something that we all want to model ourselves. And, we want to, like you said, we're the sum of the 5 best people we surround ourselves with. With that said, it's kind of cool having the job that Brandon and Kevin and Zach and myself have, is that, we get to maintain these relationships. Our attitude is, we got you for 40 years to prepare you for the next 40 years of your life. And we truly believe that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing that we try to do is to set our graduates apart. And that's why this entire selling, this live selling event that we're having, it's not about all the, it's how many calls you make, and, how do you overcome the no? My students hear me say this all the time. Look, you're not a salesman until you hear the word no. And this is our way of putting them in front of buyers. Thank you very much for saying yes to everyone that did. And it's all the money goes to student programming. And this is only going to make this sales center better. My personal opinion is that I already think we're in the top 5, if not the number 1, but that's just kind of me. But Clint, man, I can't thank you enough. Cannot thank you
Honored
enough.
to be here.
You
Anytime.
know, you're going to be here. And like I told you in the text the other day, man, hey, you're only first once, you know, and you are our first live speaker series. And for that, we definitely appreciate it so much. So
Oh man.
thank you, buddy.
I'm honored. Thank you guys so much. Hope that was helpful for all of you watching, and look forward to connecting with you in the future. All the best.
Absolutely.